Aloha and welcome to today's show on Better Government. I am Representative Richard Fale and I'm here today with Dr. Bob Howerton. Good to have you here, Doctor. Good to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
The topic for today's Better Government show has primarily to do with water catchment. But before we do that, maybe we can talk a little about you, Doctor, and get to know you a little bit better here on the show. Maybe you can give us a...
Sure. I grew up here on Oahu. Went to school at University of Hawaii, did my undergraduate, my master's there, and finished my education at Auburn University in Alabama.
Well, it's not every day that you run into a tiger here in Hawaii. What was it like going from Hawaii over to,
Good question. It was a big transition. Growing up, going to the beach, as often as possible, and then living down in the deep south and experiencing a whole different culture, different food. Most important things over there are church and college football.
Church and college football,
Yeah.
Which probably means that you are a Cam Newton fan.
I am a Cam Newton fan. Sure.
That was quite a game there with Oregon a couple years ago. But moving on to the main reason why we're here. As a person who grew up on water catchment, I didn't know it was. It's a little more complicated than it kind of seems. We put a little catchment system on our roof, and we drank the water, which was really good water. But what exactly is water catchment, and why is it important?
Water catchment, it's really important for Hawaii, especially people in rural settings that don't have access to city water. So that's basically their only water source. It can be used for drinking if treated properly, for irrigation, for livestock, and for fire control. So let's say on the Big Island, there's tens of thousands of households on water catchment, and that's basically their sole source of water. It's estimated back in 2003 there was upwards of 60,000 people in the state on water catchment. It's also pretty important on various parts of Maui and Kauai, and even over here on Oahu, people that live up in Tantalus are on water catchment.
You mentioned treatment. The water catchment that I grew up on wasn't treated in any way.
Sure.
Why would you need to treat it?
It could potentially be a source of bacterial infection, things like that. It can be treated, can be tested and then treated to disinfect the water.
Is it expensive?
No, it's cheap to treat it. There's fecal bacteria test kits available from the Cooperative Extension Service on the Big Island for $5.
What mainly is it? Birds, rats,
birds,
mice?
anything,
Okay.
Any kind of fecal material, and you can get sick, and also animal urine. It's potentially you can catch leptospirosis, but it's a simple treatment using basically chlorine. Food grade chlorine, or even bleach that you use for your household
For laundry?
use. Absolutely.
Okay. You already mentioned the number of people that do use catchment systems here in Hawaii. One of the driving issues, because it's very common to come across a home or a household
Sure.
that uses water catchment. One of the driving issues that's currently today here in the state of Hawaii is veterans access. It has to do with VA loans and the ability to buy a home, and there are problems right now with VA loans being used to purchase homes that are on water catchment systems. Are you familiar with that issue?
I'm a little bit familiar with the issue. I'm just learning about it, discussing the things with excuse me, Department of Health personnel. And apparently for years and years, the Veterans Administration had been approving loans for veterans that were applying for home loans to set up water catchment systems. And for whatever reason, just recently in the last year or so, apparently they've been turning them down. And it has something to do with the laws have not changed. The state laws have not changed concerning water catchment. The Department of Health is not responsible for any water system from a household perspective with less than 25 individuals in the house. So they're not responsible for it. And they have no jurisdiction whatsoever. So maybe there's some changing in the wording of some of the recommendations by Department of Health, but I know that Representative McDermott and some other state representatives have been working on this issue with Department of Health and the Veterans Administration for a number of months, and hopefully they'll come to some kind of positive conclusion on this.
Can you describe some of the filtration systems that would be used and like how they actually clean the water and make it safe?
Sure. There's a number of different types of filtration systems, and if you want to have potable water, drinkable water, then it's recommended to use at least cartridge filters, which you'll see some people use pool filters, sand filters, carbon filters. These can be done in a series. Initially, in the rain catchment, should be some kind of screening to get rid of the solids that get washed off of the roof. Some people
I've seen UV systems.
UV systems also, and that disinfects the water. You can use that at the end. There's ozone treatment as well. And these can, the more you put them in series, and the more types of filtration systems that you install, the more expensive the systems can be.
Okay. You mentioned there's a lot of homes on the island of Hawaii. Would VOG affect the water?
That's a very good question. It sure does. Rain is naturally acidic, and VOG contains gases that are particularly acidic, including hydrogen sulfide. Excuse me. So during periods of volcanic activities, and when we get the Kona winds, especially, it's still, then when it rains, it picks up those gases and makes the rainwater even more acidic. That causes
to toxic levels, or
not necessarily toxic levels, but it can. Most people on the Big Island have corrugated roofs,
right?
So it can start to affect that. And
wait, it'll affect the corrugated iron, so
sure, yeah.
Okay, but it won't necessarily affect the quality or toxicity of the water.
It will lower the pH, making the water more acidic. So, but there's ways to treat that as well, and can also affect your piping. If you've got copper pipes, it'll start to deteriorate the pipes as well.
How long, like within 10 years, 20 years, like what's
within a number of years, if you don't treat it, there's ways to treat, and it's also simple and inexpensive to treat acidic waters. And there's simple pH test kits available also from Cooperative Extension Service on the Big Island. I think the pH test kits are $5 or $6. And the way to treat the water, if you notice it is acidic, is with sodium bicarbonate or simple baking soda.
Okay.
So you can just dissolve that in water, put it in your tank, and mix it up, and it raises the pH. It's a buffering chemical.
Okay. So what issues are you aware of that have there been any any kind of food poisoning type issues with water catchment that, even if you do treat it, are there?
I have not come across anyone that's ever been sick. Patricia McComber, who started the water catchment work for College of Tropical Ag and resided on the Big Island, has never come across anyone, she's been there 12 or 14 years, who's ever gotten sick from their own catchment water. So, you know, I haven't seen any case of that.
When it comes to questions of sustainability, which is something that's very important, especially to a state like Hawaii, given our isolation, what are your thoughts as far as water catchment and sustainability for the people in the state of Hawaii?
That's a great question because, you know, especially on Maui where we're at, we're in a state of perennial lack of water and rainfall. So we're always looking at conservation of water. Oahu, not so much, but water conservation and water resources are important issues, especially as we continue to grow and develop, have more people moving in, larger population. Molokai is another place that's always short on water. And water catchment is a perfect way to conserve water. It minimizes runoff, stormwater runoff, erosion. It's a great way to lower water use. Even if it's non-potable water, it's perfect water for irrigation, for using
for farming,
landscaping,
which is a very important industry.
Farming,
here.
absolutely.
There are some states where water catchment systems are actually illegal. Are you familiar kind of with?
I'm learning this. I'm kind of taking over the responsibilities from Trish McComber, and so we're in a transition period, and she's been kind of mentoring me. And one of the things that I found most ironic is the state of Texas, if that rainwater hits the ground, it's the state's property.
When it hits the ground?
When it hits the ground. But if you collect it in something, then
before it hits the ground,
then you can keep it. If you collect it off your roof, off of plastic, and have it drain into a lined pond, then you can keep that water. But if it hits the ground, then it's the state's property. Now, there are some states that limit the use of water catchment, I think, as far as potable water. But you know, I'm still learning those issues. But it's all pretty interesting. It's a state-by-state jurisdiction.
Very interesting. You're actually here for a conference with the University of Hawaii.
Yeah, coincidentally, there's a conference going on as we speak. It's a 2-day conference being put on by the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College program, who I'm a part of, and also with ARCSA, which is the American Rainwater Collection System Association. So a gentleman that's an expert in rainwater catchment has been putting on this workshop for us, and it's, you know, very interesting and informative.
Okay, kind of going back to our rural communities. I live in a rural community on northern Oahu. Would you advise the use of catchment systems as something that we should promote in the future?
Absolutely. I think it's very important. Rural communities, government institutions, public schools, it can be used on any building with a roof. And again, that water doesn't have to be potable. It can be used for irrigation, for landscaping, as you mentioned, for livestock, for farming, for fire control. So any way we can conserve water, and I think it's a good thing.
Maybe you can talk briefly about some of the drought issues that we're kind of facing here in the state of Hawaii. Is there any way to kind of course it's going to be directly related to water conservation efforts, but what can be done to help kind of assist those areas that are struggling with water issues these days?
Well, as I mentioned before, on Maui we're in a perennial drought situation, and the county government, Maui County, is also always asking for water conservation measures. You know, be cognizant of how much water you use. You know, simple things, short showers, turning off the water when you're brushing your teeth. I think if we can start to initiate the use of gray water into some of our housing codes, that would be a great way to minimize the use of potable water for landscaping and things like that. There's a multitude of ways to conserve water, and I think much of it has to do with just simple educating the public.
Can you talk a little bit more about gray water and what you just mentioned, incorporating gray water?
Well, it's my understanding that a number of county codes do not allow the use of gray water. And gray water is simply water from showers, from sinks, anything except for toilet water. You know, that's considered black water. That water can be diverted. You know, water used for your washing machine can be diverted and used for watering your landscape plants and your lawn.
Detergent and those things?
Absolutely.
That's not an issue?
Well,
or chlorine if you use bleach and...
It can be, but chlorine dissipates relatively quickly in the water. It's basically a gas in the water, and if the water sits for a day, you know, it'll dissipate from the water itself. Or if it's aerated, it'll dissipate even quicker.
Okay. Anything else about a water catchment that you think should be of particular?
I think it's something that Hawaii should look into seriously as a measure for water conservation. Our water resources are finite. We don't feel it nearly as much here on Oahu as we do on the outer islands. But as we see some of the effects of climate change and different weather patterns, historically we've seen less and less rainfall here in Hawaii. So we have to look at all different aspects of water conservation to make sure we have enough water to continue the lifestyle we've grown accustomed to here.
You've mentioned on Maui, what is the status of the aquifers on the state of Maui? I mean, on the island of Maui.
Yeah, I don't know enough about that, but I know that there's it has limited growth, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You know, there's a lot of decisions that the mayor's office has made as far as slowing down the types of development taking place over there, and looking for various sources of water, different aquifers, and as some of the plantations have closed down, water resources are a very big issue over there. What the water can be diverted for, what the priorities are, whether it's agriculture, whether it's development. Hawaiian rights is a big issue, Hawaiian water rights. So there's a multitude of complicated issues concerning Maui's water.
And water is directly related, and access to water is directly related to the success and viability of the agriculture industry here in Hawaii.
Very much so.
From what you've seen, as far as access to water goes, do you feel like the agriculture industry, at least maybe on Maui, do you think it's looking okay?
Yeah, the mayor has made it a high priority for agriculture to have access to water. He's put a lot of resources into it. Much of the agriculture taking place on Maui is upcountry, so he's put a substantial amount of resources into making sure they have access to ag water, pumping stations, and reservoirs and things like that. But there's sure is a lot more work to be done to allow agriculture to sustain itself and continue to grow.
This is one of the projects that we've been working on with the Department of Land and Natural Resources is trying to return native forest cover, especially on the slopes of mountains, to help with retaining water in our watershed areas. Would too many catchment systems kind of have a negative impact on replenishing aquifers in the ground? Would that be an issue?
Yeah, but I think we're far from having too many catchment systems. Some of the biggest problems about restoring the forest areas is minimizing the amount of feral animals. You know, axis deer is a big problem on Maui now. It you know, adds to the erosion from up mountains down below, and I think that's more of a problem than having reservoirs around it. I know there's been some demonstrations about fencing off certain areas of the Big Island. It's expensive, but you know, it's if that's a priority, then that should be done to return to the indigenous type of plants that were there in the first place.
I came across an article that talked about, and this is kind of like the way things kind of go in cycles, is that with those areas where we've seen a lot of the rainfall kind of drop as far as the quantity, that the reefs have actually done pretty well, because you don't have that silt coming off and killing the reefs. So they've seen at least some marine life kind of thrive. Are you kind of familiar with that, or? No,
but from personal observations, like for example on Molokai, and you know what's happened recently, you know, in the last 10 or 15 years, is we get less kinds of seasonal rains that we used to. You know, in the winter we used to get good rains, but now we get larger rain events. So we still get, when those rain events occur, we still get a fair amount of erosion. And a lot of that erosion, again, goes back to cattle grazing, you know, on the mountain slopes, and again, wild pigs, goats, deer, sheep.
Okay. Well, kind of going back to one of the main reasons why we have you here today, Doctor, is what can be done to help promote water catchment and allow our VA loans to be used for the purchase of homes?
Well, again, I'm not privy to you know, all the dialogue that's taken place between the Veterans Administration, the state legislators, and the Department of Health, but apparently there's been some fairly good progress, and hopefully there'll be a solution in the not too distant future. But it's imperative, if you know, veterans or not veterans, if you're in certain areas of Hawaii, it's a necessity to have a water catchment. And as my understanding in the past, the VA didn't have a problem with these home loans with veterans, and it's just, this is a recent development.
And the technology exists to make sure that that whatever water is collected from a catchment system is completely safe.
Absolutely.
And there's no issues there. Actually, if you compare the water that I have had from a water catchment system actually seems to taste better.
I agree with you. There's stream water. People say don't drink the stream water. I think it's the most delicious water, you know, depending on what stream you're in.
Right, right.
You know, but mountain streams, you know, it's fresh water. There's been water catchment systems for hundreds and hundreds of years in all various parts of the world. All of them didn't have any kind of treatment whatsoever.
Who do you think has the best model for water catchment? Like, who would you refer to as an ideal model of water catchment?
I think what we do here in Hawaii, you know, for people that are concerned about getting sick, if you have a good filtration system, I think that's an ideal model. But putting out a bucket out in the middle of a rainstorm, if that bucket's clean, that's great water. But that's just, you know, how I was raised. You know, we go run out in the rainstorm, run around, and you know, drink the rainwater. Didn't matter. Good stream water.
Well, Doctor, appreciate you being here. And the final question is, who, if there are any questions or problems with the water catchment system, who would be the best person to contact or talk to?
Well, in the past, it's been Trish McComber. Again, she was with UH College of Tropical Ag, and I'm taking over those extension responsibilities from her. So at this point, contacting me would be fine. And again, as I learn on the job, you know, I'm getting more and more comfortable doing this work, and been fielding, you know, a few hundred questions and emails in the past few months. So just contact me at my email, which is howerton@hawaii.edu.
Howerton@hawaii.edu.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, appreciate it, Doctor.
Well,